Welcome to Beyond Bitewings, the business side of dentistry, brought to you by Edwards & Associates PC. Join us as we discuss how to build your dental practice, optimize your income, and plan for your future. This podcast is distributed with the understanding that Edwards & Associates PC is not rendering legal, accounting, or professional advice. Listeners should consult with their business advisors before acting on any of the information that is shared. At Edwards & Associates PC, our business is the business of dentistry. For help or more information, visit our website at eandassociates.com. Hello and welcome to another episode of Beyond Bitewings. In today's episode, we will be talking about some of the dental industry trends that are on the lips of pretty much all our clinical listeners out there. Within the studio, we have Robert.
Good afternoon.
And myself, Ash. So how are you doing today, Robert?
Oh, well, excuse me. It's after tax season, so
yay!
feel great.
I know.
Yeah.
And the weather, well...
No, don't get too excited about that.
Yeah, it's been...
And if you don't like it, wait 30 minutes. I mean, it's Texas, so...
That's true. That's the fun of it, right?
Yeah, okay.
The unpredictability. I'm all about the silver lining.
If that's fun for you, you need to get out more.
Right. Oh, my goodness. See, that's why I don't own a convertible. Pointless.
We can use a convertible about a week a year.
Right? Right.
Down here in Dallas.
That's true. Okay.
So what are you seeing as far as trends in dentistry?
There's quite a few, honestly. I know we're in the year of 2023, and, the past year, in fact, couple of years, it's been...
Unique.
Very unique,
yeah.
Right? And there's been no set pattern that can be analyzed to kind of forecast what may happen or come in the future. But overall, I feel like at least the clients I have, they were very optimistic about 2023. And they still are. I mean, we're still, in the early parts of 2023. And they're all excited about implementing new things or thinking of new ways to get back to that growth that they were so used to pre-pandemic.
Okay, but let's get more of a high altitude view of dentistry. Okay,
sure.
As far as I know where you're headed, and I want to delve into that in more detail. But if you're just looking at overall the general dental industry, and what trends do we really see there? And I think you've got the ongoing staff shortages,
right? The
ongoing new graduates that are coming out of school with more debt than they've ever had before. In fact, I think the article that we read to prep for this session said the average was $304,840 was the average student loan debt for a dental school graduate now.
That's true.
So $305,000. Amazing that it's that high. And the trend toward corporate dentistry, I think that's a big trend as well. And I think with the combination of corporate dentistry and all the student loan debt, I'm getting word in a lot of the people that I see across the table at lunch these days that are in the industry that there's fewer and fewer of the dental school graduates that are wanting to own a practice. And I remember in the old days where somebody would come up to me and say, hey, I don't really want to run this business. I just want to see patients. Mm-hmm. And, that's kind of, we're back to that now. And big time, I think a lot of the people are not taking that first step of ownership. They are just saying, hey, I don't want to own a practice. I just want to see patients. I don't want to have to worry about, paying the bills and filling the chairs and dealing with the insurance companies. I just want to see my patients, go home at night, and have a life. And they're willing to forego building their own business to be able to just, have more of a social life.
Which makes sense, yeah. And honestly, I do understand where they're coming from. I mean, as you just mentioned, with even the staff shortages, these people, we're talking about dentists, clinicians that are expert planners. I know every time they make a decision, they are doing their due diligence. They're researching, they're talking to their peers, they're reading all these articles. And as they're doing this, they're seeing all these struggles that the current business owners are facing. And they're at a point where they're forced to ask themselves, okay, whatever way most dentists used to go about things last year or the year before, is that the right path?
Yeah, and after you do all that, is it worth it?
That's also true.
And, I think when you go out there and you read about, what these practices are doing, it's sort of negative because you're trying to fix a problem. You're trying to do something different to create a result.
Oh, I see.
So that's the positive part of that is that you're taking action, but the negative part is that you need to take action. You need to make a change because something's not going the way you want it. And a lot of these people are just saying, hey, the heck with that. I'm done with this. I just want to see my patients, go home at night, don't have to make any follow-up calls.
Right.
I just show up in the morning. Somebody else puts the patients in my chair. I do the work and go home at night.
Right. That's true. So what other options would there be for, let's say, someone who just graduated dental school and it's been 2 years they've been doing an associateship? What should be their next step?
Okay, now you're asking me that question.
In your opinion. I mean, we're also seeing some of these changes.
Well, I mean, in my opinion, like I said, they could work for corporate dentistry, and I think a lot of them are making, good money. I mean, $200,000, $250,000, $300,000. I think very few are really making $400 or more, but $250 to $300 is not uncommon at all.
Right.
And that's great money. I mean, how many people make that? You're in the top 1%er, I guess, maybe 0.5% if you're making that kind of income. So what else should they do, or what should they do, in my opinion? Well, I think I could still show you how it would be worth your while to start your own practice. Of course, you're not going to make that kind of money in the first 2 or 3 or 4 years. You might in the 4th year. You might even in the 3rd year, but you're not in the 1st or 2nd year. Boy, you're growing it from scratch if you do it from scratch. But we've got so many clients that I have seen that have started practices from scratch that are doing $1 million by their 5th year. And then they're making, $300 to $350 or so. In the future, when that practice goes further, they're going to make more. I mean, heck, we've got clients. I'm thinking of one guy that his practice is probably doing 1.7, 1.8, and he's taking home pretty close to $1 million.
I see.
I can think of another one, a female dentist down in Austin, that one of our clients that, again, I think she was collecting around $2 million and taking home about $950.
Right.
So that's a lot more than you can make in corporate dentistry, but it's the long term. It's not the short term. That's not going to happen in the first 2 or 3 years. And it may never happen. I mean, it's a gamble.
Right.
I mean, that's the other thing. If you go with corporate dentistry and you're on salary, it's less risk because you're going to get a paycheck every 2 weeks or twice a month, and you're going to take the money home, put it in the bank. Hopefully, don't spend it all.
But it's pay towards that giant student loan.
Exactly. But, it's a sure thing.
Right. That's true. But, I think opening up a practice of their own is still a little bit appealing. I think there's a fear factor there, which is probably preventing them from taking all the steps needed to make that happen, because you can be your own boss. I think that idea is very appealing still to a lot of these students that are going to graduate dental school.
I don't disagree with you, but unfortunately, I think one of the, I hate to use the word problem. I think one of the challenges that a lot of our clients have is that they are their own boss, and so they're really not held accountable. We've got a lot of clients that I don't think they ever really set goals until we sit down with them and say, hey, what's your goal for next year? And so we kind of make our clients accountable to us.
Right.
Because they're not accountable to anyone else. And I think to create results, to create better results, you have to be accountable to somebody.
Good point. Yeah.
And so we sort of function in that mode. And I think a lot of doctors that become their own boss, it's like, well, I'm my own boss. I can do whatever I want to now.
Right,
so if I don't want to deal with that, I don't have to.
Right.
Unfortunately, if they don't deal with maybe staff issue, if they don't deal with it, what's going to happen? All of a sudden, you look at your staff and seems like the inmates are running the asylum, right?
Right.
Yeah,
That's true.
You got to be a leader.
Right.
And again, that goes back to the frustration. A lot of the doctors, they want to have their own business. They never really thought about or were trained in leadership.
I see.
And so those are things they've got to focus on, not clinical. I mean, they know the clinical stuff. They're trained on that. Not quite 24 hours a day, but they probably think they are when they're in dental school. But, they get significant training in the clinical side. They get almost zero training, maybe actually zero training on the business side.
I do agree.
Yeah.
And that's actually something I almost always ask.
And that leads to probably 99% of the challenges in a practice.
I see.
Is the lack of business training.
So you're saying to avoid all of that, they could just not open their practice, go into corporate dentistry. And that's why we're talking about
Yeah,
this.
exactly. And I think that's the reason a lot of them are doing that, is just to have a better, in their minds, to have a less stressful lifestyle.
Right. Now, you mentioned staffing shortages also being a concern or a trend of 2023. So what's happening?
Well, you're better to answer that than I am, because when I talk to you in some of our weekly meetings, you're closer to some of the clients that are that have given you some ideas that were really informative to me. And I think what I know from talking to my clients is that some of them are experiencing a little bit less of a problem than they did a year ago.
I would agree with that.
But it's still a problem.
Yes.
But also, I know you had some ideas where some people could do some advertising to actually find people and ways to do that. And I think that's more important now than it's ever been. I mean, you can't just throw an ad out there and all of a sudden you get 10 resumes and I've got the pick of the litter. That doesn't happen anymore. You may throw an ad out there and get nothing but crickets. Mm-hmm. And then you've got to figure out, what do I do next?
Right. Yeah. Or you're automatically assuming that there are no workers out there.
And that's not right. There are people out there looking for work. Mm-hmm. There are fewer of them, and they're less willing to work for what they would have worked for 2 years ago. But
that is true.
I mean, the media did us no favors in the last 2 years when they've talked about inflation. I think it's blown out of proportion, but it has definitely increased. I mean, for almost 30 years, inflation averaged about 2%.
Right.
And now all of a sudden it's, 9.5% a couple months last year. But now it's back down to maybe 5.5% on an annual basis. But that's still almost triple what it has been for the last 30 years. So I'm not denying that it's an issue.
Yeah.
And in dentistry, it's a huge issue, especially if you're looking at, let's say, hygienist wages.
Oh, my goodness. Yes.
Everybody's favorite topic.
Oh, my goodness.
And on top of that, a lot of hygienists left the industry during COVID.
That's also true. Yeah, the Great Resignation.
Yeah.
That occurred. Yeah, I mean, the term that...
And a lot of those haven't come back and won't come back.
That's true.
So, it's created shortages, but now we're a couple of cycles beyond that, and the hygiene schools are still turning out people, and so maybe the supply is improving. But wages are not really flexible downward. When you have an increase in wages, don't expect that to... once you have a bunch of new graduates, don't expect that to come back down, because everybody says, oh, well, I know 10 people that are making, $50 an hour. So why would I accept 45?
Right. And that's in Texas.
Yeah.
It's much higher in other states.
Absolutely. Yeah. A client of ours in Denver, I know, is paying, I think, $75 hygienist. Yeah. I think up in Seattle, they're making $90.
Yeah.
So it's insane.
It is insane.
I mean, people are saying, well, how can you make money?
Right.
Paying hygienists that salary. They've got to be productive.
Right. That's true. Now, hygienists, there is actually a shortage of them. Aside from them asking for money and a lot of them actually quitting that profession altogether, there's actually a shortage. But even in the other areas, when we're talking about dental assistants or front desk people, their numbers are much higher in comparison to dentists. However, it's not just the rising costs that's causing them to leave, saying that, oh, I'm not making enough where I can, afford my living. A lot of them are actually getting poached. So what's happening is that because everybody's currently talking about the staffing shortage, there's a fear in all the business owners. So anytime a business owner notices that there's some drama and something may happen, they proactively start looking for filling up those positions in other practices. Competing practices.
Well, and let me tell you, too, a word of advice for all the business owners, all the dental practice owners out there. It's way less expensive to pay more to your current employees.
Right.
Even if you think it's a bad move, it's way better for your practice. Keep the same employee. That means there's some consistency there, and pay them more rather than hiring somebody that you don't know what their talents are and then having to train them.
I agree.
So think about that. If you've got someone that threatens to leave or someone that is giving you notice even, don't take no for an answer. Ask them, hey, if I match that offer, would you stay here because you already know the people here? You're familiar with the patients?
I agree. Yeah. And you actually raised a good point, because I actually had a conversation just yesterday with a client about conversion rates. He had 2 front desk people that are quitting altogether. He said they're not just leaving. They did put in their 2 weeks notice. But of course, after putting in their notice, they kind of stopped working or paying too much attention.
Checked out.
They kind of checked out. Exactly. Now, this client is used to almost 100% conversion rate month to month. And this client relies a lot on like bigger cases. A huge chunk of his collections come from there. So all of a sudden, he started seeing a drop. And he was very focused on the clinical part. But, the drop was so significant that he had to look into it. And
what's going on?
What's going on?
Yeah.
And he looked into it. And he was like, okay, I'm confused because I thought we have at least 5 lined up, which was supposed to bring closer in the range of 6 figures. But all of a sudden now, they weren't converted.
Yeah.
There's a small window there where you have to do this conversion. And that window was not utilized by the people that typically do this.
Communications and follow-up.
Exactly. Now, what happened was when the 2 people that were in his front desk area that told him that we're going to quit, he did ask them, what can I do for you to stay? So apparently they asked for a raise to him that sounded preposterous. But he wasn't actually aware what these people were doing to help with his collections.
Okay.
He just thought, they're just, doing whatever they were trained. Mm-hmm. He had no idea that one of those front desk people who's been with him for some time, I think almost 2 years, has created a personal rapport with all of these people. And some of these people that were coming in with the big cases were through word of mouth from her.
Yeah.
So her leaving, it's not like she's taking them with her somewhere.
I started to say, I hope she's moving out of the area.
No, she is. She's not. So apparently it wasn't under bad terms that they're ending that relationship, that professional relationship. But he was just upset. He was like, I wish I knew that because then I could have said yes to that raise.
Right.
I didn't realize what I was losing until it was too late.
Yeah.
So that was the thing. So again, going back to that. So importance of exit interviews and actually kind of assessing what that employee's worth and kind of figuring out what they're asking for and see if it's something that can be at least matched.
So I think the moral of that story there is basically, I don't know, take your staff to lunch once a week or something, or sit down and talk to them after hours for, 15 minutes, find out what's going on in their life, establish a relationship,
That's true.
Communicate. Like I said, be a leader. Find out what's going on in your staff's lives and show some interest.
That's true.
They're
And
more
that goes a long way.
they're more likely to stick around longer.
Yeah.
And you need that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Let's talk a little bit about corporate dentistry. That's a huge trend. Everybody knows it is. I mean, I get calls, not every day, maybe 3 times, 4 times a week. Hey, so-and-so DSO called me or sent me an email, wants to meet with me. What do I do? I don't know. What do you want to do? Well, I think I want $4 million for my practice. Well, wait a minute. You're only producing $1 million. And that's sort of the game plan, right. and I've developed a spreadsheet where I can sit down and take the LOI that a client receives from any DSO. We can plug the numbers in. I can show them what it would look like if they continue to own and operate the practice for the next 5 or 7 years, as opposed to what it would look like if they sold the practice to the DSO. And in almost every case, there's a dramatic difference in the doctor's compensation, even after taking into consideration some of the rollover equity and the cash you would receive up front from the DSO for the practice. So you got to take all that into consideration. And basically, long story short is, I think some of the doctors that are older, it makes more sense to sell to the DSO than it does the younger doctors, because the older ones, maybe they're only going to work 5 more years.
I see.
The younger ones, let's say they're going to work 15 more years, then they would make way more by continuing to own and operate.
I see.
Rather than the older ones that are close anyway.
I see.
And you can't just sell to a DSO and walk away.
Right.
Most of the DSOs have a lot of strings attached to some of those numbers. They have a lot of deferred compensation that you don't get if you don't hit certain goals or if you don't continue to work there for a certain period of time. So we take all that into consideration. I show them best case, worst case, and it almost always comes out, better if you continue to own and operate versus sell until you get to be somewhere in your 50s.
I see. Now, what do you think is the big motivator? Why do you think this is such a trend?
Money. I mean, it's the big dollars. I wasn't kidding. Well, a little bit. I was exaggerated a little bit. You probably wouldn't get $4 million for a practice that's producing one.
All right.
But I have seen some offers that were close to $4 million for practices producing less than two.
I see. Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's not based on collections like your traditional model of a dental practice transition. It's based more on EBITDA. And EBITDA is what I call adjusted net income. Mm-hmm. And it's a multiple of that. And multiples have gone up. I mean, I think 4 or 5 years ago, the average multiple was 3.5. And today it's more like 5.5.
Wow.
And I think they'll probably go up a little more before they don't.
Yeah. And I can understand how this might be all lucrative and how it sounds amazing to an older dentist. But what about the younger dentist? You said sometimes it doesn't make sense for them to sell to a DSO.
Well, what they see is the dollars they're going to get when they sell it, mm-hmm. and the opportunity to get additional dollars when the DSO has another equity event.
Right.
Now, there are so many DSOs that have promised equity events in the future. Mm-hmm. There's not enough equity in the United States to fill all those obligations. And some of those, think of musical chairs, the game of musical chairs. Some of those dentists that sold to DSOs are going to get left without a chair. In other words, their rollover equity is going to be worthless, mm-hmm. And that's just a fact of life. The numbers just don't work.
Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean they shouldn't sell to a DSO.
That's right. It doesn't. And some of the DSOs are negotiable. I've happened to have sold one of our clients' practice to a DSO earlier this year, and we were able to minimize the rollover equity. I think we just left $100,000 because they required it. We completely eliminated all the deferred payments. We got all the money discounted and given up front. And then we negotiated an employment contract for my client. And it was a younger client, but she had other concerns like a young family that's now getting to school age, and she wanted to spend more time with them. Mm-hmm. And she's going to continue to work in this practice, but she wants to cut down from 4 days to 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. And they'll bring in another doctor. That's the advantage of the DSO as support. They'll bring in a second doctor to pick up the slack. And she's going to get paid a percentage of production. So for her, it wasn't so much the compensation issue. She had other lifestyle concerns. And for people like that, it makes sense. You have to analyze each individual situation individually.
I see.
Sure.
So it's not so much like the age, it's more the lifeline of that profession. So if they feel like they are closer towards the end, let's say they want to focus more on family and actually quit altogether, or even from an age standpoint, like, I'd rather go golfing or fishing at that age. That's when they should, in your opinion, start considering selling to a DSO.
Well, and I laughed when you said that, but I laughed because I'm thinking of a different client we had that when he sold to the DSO, he wanted to take off a certain number of weeks a year. I can't remember. It was some ungodly amount, like, 10 or 12 weeks a year.
Oh, goodness.
And we were able to accomplish that.
Wow.
Okay. We were able to negotiate that because that was his concern. It was a lifestyle issue. He wanted more time off, and he said, I own this practice. I'm tethered to it. I can't get away from it. Okay, so let's, sell and make it where they are going to give you this time off because they can bring in another doctor to cover for you. That's fine. It worked. It worked great. Right. So it is a case-by-case basis. Sometimes it makes sense to sell earlier if it's a lifestyle issue. Mm-hmm. If it's a financial issue, then, once you're in your mid to late 50s, it makes more sense at that point than when you're in your early 40s.
I agree, yes. And speaking of work-life balance, I feel like that is also a trend, at least with the people that I'm talking to. I remember before I would ask them about their 5-year plan or their 10-year plan. I'm like, where do you see yourself? And they would always talk numbers with me. It wasn't until the pandemic when they started saying, figure out a way so I can spend more time with my daughter. Oh, whoa, this is a new request.
Yeah.
That's the planning I need from you.
Well, I think people dropped back and took stock of life, and a lot of people's priorities changed.
Right.
During the pandemic.
Right.
And I agree with you. On that. People re-examined their lives and reestablished priorities and decided they're going to live their lives differently now. And that's a good thing. Yeah, things that have come out of the pandemic have been, for the most part, good.
Yeah. Now let's talk about other kinds of trends that can actually help boost the money, the big dollar sign, aside from just selling, but things that they can do. Sometimes, these are things they've probably even heard over the radio or on another podcast or even on an article, but they're scared. to even go further or dive into it.
Well,
one of them,
and the big one is going out of network.
Yes, there we go.
When I mention that to a client, the first words out of their mouth, "Oh, I can't do that. I'll lose my patients." But there's a right way to do it, and it's not overnight. It takes a couple of years at the least to do it right and to maintain your patient base. Mm-hmm. And there are people out there that have worked with ADOM, and creating scripts for the front desk people, teaching them how to speak to the existing patients that are on insurance and let them know what you're doing and tell them to do it in a way where they don't leave the practice. And we have some clients that have done that very, very successfully.
Right.
So I know it can be done.
Right. Now, the other aspect to this, and this is something I've heard from a client, is they actually believe by being at network, it helps with their marketing.
Well, theoretically, it's going to give you patients from that network.
Right.
But, the dentist across the street and the one around the corner and the one down the block are probably in that same network.
Yeah.
So are you getting, your 25% share of that market? I doubt it. Mm-hmm. I doubt it. Mm-hmm. Because unless you're the only one in your zip code or in your, 5-block radius that's in that, or 3-mile radius that's in that network, then you can't be guaranteed that they're going to come to you as opposed to the next guy on the list.
Right.
And right now, one of the big trends in dentistry is convenience. And so they're going to go to, whoever's closest or most convenient. And it may not be whoever's closest. It may be who has the hours that they want to see.
Right.
If you're open, 8 to 5, and somebody else is open, let's say 7 to 3, 2 days a week, and then 3 to 7, 2 other days, they're going to go to that person that's open 3 to 7 and probably take the late appointment.
Right. That's true. Yeah. Or even if they're open one day during the weekend. On a Saturday, maybe do hygiene work on Saturdays.
Yeah, I think we just lost a lot of listeners there. But you are right. And those examples I gave, 8 to 5 and 3 to 7 and 7 to 3. Yeah. Clients of ours are doing that, so I know that works. And I know I've seen some try weekends. And the complaint I get about weekends is, if the weather's nice, people cancel without calling. Right. But also, you can fill the chairs on the weekend because that's when people would like to, that's when people have the time available and would come in. Some of them would come in.
That's true. Yeah. And it's not just in those areas. There are other ways they can make it more convenient to the patient, utilizing the technology that's out there.
Okay. Yeah. So take that and run with it.
No, I will. Yeah, because I was thinking, and I know we covered a little bit of this in our previous episodes, but I feel like it should be mentioned again because there's value there. Automation, utilizing some of the tools that are available in the existing software that's being used by a lot of our clients.
Because most of the software out there is very underutilized.
I agree. Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. I agree with what you're saying.
Yes. So, sometimes just making that one phone call to find out exactly what you're getting in that software package can go a long way. You'd be surprised. I'm sure sometimes you may have seen a peer like doing certain things, like being able to set up an online portfolio where they can schedule their own, time of when they're going to go see the dentist without having to pick up the phone and talk to someone, And you have to understand another thing about us in general. We're used to now doing things round the clock.
And that goes back to convenience. Being able to schedule your appointments online,
exactly.
and the hours and everything else.
Yeah, at any time. Yeah.
And then, like you said, the technology.
Yeah.
I mean, believe it or not, artificial intelligence is making an entry into the dental market.
That's also true.
As well.
That's also true. Yeah. So, like, for instance, the dentist I go to, that dentistry may be closed after 6 p.m., but I'm probably not going to get time till after 6 p.m. to look at my calendar and figure out when I should schedule it. And I'm probably wanting to do it right then and there. Again, a fault of our generation, instant gratification, right? We need to do it right then and there. But if you don't have an online portfolio where I can go and see the availability, I'm not going to be able to do that right then and there. I may have to wait the next day during business hours and I have to remember that and then call and schedule. A lot of work. Instead, what I may do, I may just look for another dentist who has that portal.
Yeah.
Online search without having to even pick up the phone.
Yeah, because if you're like me and I have to remember to do it tomorrow, then either I email someone to do it for me tomorrow, or a couple of days later, I remember that I was going to do it, which is now yesterday. So
Right.
like you said, it does take longer to get it done because you just get busy and you forget, some of these things that you were going to do.
Right. Right. I agree.
And one of the other things, we talked about an online portal. We talked about extended office hours. We talked about allowing the patients to pay online or schedule appointments online, but also offering additional services in your practice to give the patients an all-in-one shop to do whatever they need done. And a lot of the doctors are offering, BOTOX injections or fillers or some other things like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, I think, I've had some clients that talk to me about the ethics of doing that. And I don't think that's an issue. I mean, I shouldn't say I don't think it's an issue. It's not a legal issue. There are so many people doing it now, and there just hasn't been any legal precedents against it. So if you're not on board, I think that's certainly a easy way to generate some pretty significant additional revenue.
I agree. And again, I'm not an attorney, so I can't speak for the legal side. Maybe consulting with an attorney might be
Thank you for that.
the best route. However, in my opinion, if you're getting the training and if you're taking the CE classes, if the equipment that's being placed for the aesthetics, the Botox that can be done as the additional service, I feel like you're doing your due diligence to avoid having or feeling like you're doing something unethical.
Yeah. I agree. And I think the doctors, they have the training to do the injections.
Right.
I know they feel like, I had some comments from clients that felt like, hey, that needs to be a medical doctor. Well, no, it really doesn't. I mean, you're authorized, as a dentist, you're authorized to do that. Now, I know there's certain parameters, but I think those are covered. Certainly, take a continuing education course on it and find out more. That's the best advice I can give you.
I agree. And especially if your practice is in a place which is crowded with a lot of dentists, maybe diversifying some of these services that you offer can actually help you with increasing your collections.
Well, yeah, because it differentiates you from some of your competition down the street.
Right.
And let's say you're in Frisco. You need that.
Yeah.
There are too many dentists in Frisco. I'm sorry,
Goodness.
guys.
Yeah.
Fact of life.
Oh, goodness. But that's definitely there. Or even if you're in a small town, but you've been there for so long that everybody knows you, you're like, am I even going to get a new patient here anymore?
Well, if you're in a small town and you're the only dentist there, then how are you going to grow your practice, right? So you've got to offer additional services.
Right. Exactly. So I'm all for it, honestly. This trend, when I first heard of it, I'm like, wow, this is really thinking outside the box. Botoxes, sleep apnea treatment, and then what is that? Tongue tie surgeries, and then
jaw,
the lockjaw. And then I'm like amazed. I think the other day somebody came to me and they were thinking of doing med spa. The whole idea was like a ghost kitchen operation. I'm like, what? So you're going to have an LLC within that LLC, but it's going to offer. I'm like, this is amazing, and it just amazes me some of these times when I'm talking to my clients and they've probably heard of it somewhere and they're sharing it with me.
Most of them have heard it somewhere,
right?
And then they bring it to us because, in my experience, a lot of those somewheres that they've heard things are really not the best places to get information. I could go on from there, but I'm not gonna.
No, I agree. Yeah. Some of them could be even, the TikTok or, a closed group on Facebook where you don't necessarily only have dentists.
You definitely don't only have dentists. You have people pretending.
Right. Oh, goodness. But it is a trend to at least consider, to look into it, to see if it'll work. There's plenty of people. I know if you are thinking of buying an equipment for that additional service you're going to provide, the vendor is very knowledgeable about it. There was one, I think, facial aesthetic equipment salesperson who sent a lot of stats on, what they should expect the first couple of months, how to even market this with their existing website, with their existing tools, and what they can expect realistically by buying that equipment and utilizing it for those additional services that they're going to provide.
Another thing you could do, and you talked about it before we actually started the podcast today, and that's teledentistry.
Yeah, yeah.
You asked me how many of the clients that I work with are doing teledentistry, and I don't know that any of them are.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know of any of my clients, or they haven't at least mentioned it to me. So it makes sense. Honestly, I've utilized the teledoc option a lot.
And it's worked amazingly well, in my opinion. I didn't have much hope for it. I thought, I'll just call and ask this question. And I thought, that was a good answer.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just what I wanted to hear. I don't know. It worked for me.
Right. But, even the cell phones that we use, I had no idea that the cell phone can be used to like scan a lot of things, and then they can like create this like digital augmented image where they can, rotate that image and show me, okay, is this what you're feeling, or is this that inflammation?
Yeah.
It just teleports right there.
Yeah.
In real time, and it's amazing. I'm like, I don't even have to drive or dress up to go there.
And another thing people can start doing in their practice to create a better patient experience is using 3D printer.
That's true.
3D printers are becoming more and more popular.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are using those for other than crowns. They're using those for sometimes to do fillings.
Yeah, yeah.
Or to design the filling.
Why wouldn't you? I mean, think about it. It's cost effective. Again, convenience.
Right
there.
Right.
Less wait time. The lead time is like almost none.
Right.
Because you're doing it in-house.
Right.
And they're fairly inexpensive because there are tons of manufacturers out there now that make 3D printers. And the technology is only getting better.
I agree. Yep. I agree with that.
So definitely. I mean, I would say that's a no-brainer. But, on that note, let's also talk about, since we are talking about 3D printers and equipment, there are some other pretty nifty equipments that are out there that can help with the diagnosis, with the treatment. I feel like because you're getting a clearer image, more of a 4D rendition, you can, even the clinician can see things better and make more recommendations in that treatment plan. Now, these equipment pieces can be quite expensive, but from what I've heard, at least from my clients, it has paid off.
Okay. Then you also mentioned green dentistry.
No, I didn't. So what is that?
Before we started our podcast, you mentioned it as far as going green in dentistry.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true. I did mention that. So the reason why I mentioned it was because honestly, when I hear go green, I think of those auto prompts I get from my bank accounts like, hey, do you approve so we don't have to mail you your bank statements and you can download it yourself? And I honestly thought, what is green dentistry? Like, are they not going to print paper anymore? Is that what it is?
Well, no, here's some examples, like reducing or eliminating the use of aerosols in your practice, or designing your practice layout to maximize natural light and ventilation, using natural cleaning products in the office, using eco-friendly sterilization products.
There we go. Yes.
So those are all things you can do to create a more patient-friendly practice.
Yeah, I agree. Yes. And honestly, as I'm picturing this, I mean, you're saying it and I'm picturing, I'm like, you know what? I would like to be a patient in a practice like that. Natural light, more windows. I can see people are being more environmentally conscious. It will make me feel good in a way.
Well, and when you're talking about creating a better patient experience, if you haven't updated your office in a few years, go sit in your reception area. Just sit there and look around like you were a patient, and you'll see things differently. I did that in our office probably, 10 years ago. I went and sat down, I looked around, and I made some changes.
Okay.
Because it's just a different perspective. So as the doctor, go sit in your reception area, look around, picture yourself as a patient, or picture yourself, as a patient of the practice, and what would you rather see rather than what's there? Make some changes. That's really easy to do. And I know patients like to see the latest and greatest. They like to see, a bright, active office, bright. Like I said that already, but bright, either with light or with colors. And they just like to see updated decor as well as machines.
Yeah. So more like contemporary decor as opposed to, traditional.
Yeah. I think in the old days, everything was earth tones. Okay,
Right.
Don't do that today. The browns and the grays are kind of out. Put in some bright colors.
Yeah. Or maybe even get the help of an interior designer.
that's an even better suggestion.
Yeah. Because sometimes what we don't know, right?
True.
Like I like earthly colors. If somebody tells me, "Hey, how are you into decorating?"
Because you're a guy.
Could be. I'm like, I like that. But somebody may tell me, no, you don't want to use those colors. You want to use more green because it's easier on the eyes. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. I would have never thought of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, quite a few things. And honestly, when we were doing our research, there's actually quite a few of them. To me, that suggests people are eager to make these changes. They're thinking about these changes. They're willing to think outside of the box. And it's just about enacting them at this point. Right?
I agree.
And
it's not expensive for the most part, and it's not difficult. Make some changes that'll make a change in your patient's experience. And if you're not using patient communication software, oh my gosh, it's way past time.
I agree.
Go get something. Because one of the main complaints of patients these days is lack of appointment reminders. Mm-hmm. And when I read that, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Because I know my dentist sends me an appointment reminder 2 weeks out and a week out and 3 days out. They send me a text. Mm-hmm. And it's great. I look at it and say, okay, I delete it. And then you can confirm. Easy. You just put yes and you're confirmed.
Yeah. I get actually 3: text, email, and a voicemail. But when I actually listen to the voicemail, I can tell it's automated.
Okay.
So they're definitely using a software to do that, to send those out.
Yeah.
So that's good. No, great tips, Robert.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So for all our listeners out there, if you guys have any questions, queries, or if you guys would like to add more to what we just said, feel free to reach us at info@eandassociates.com, and that's "and" spelled out. It's always a pleasure being here, so thank you.
Yeah, it was fun.
Thanks for listening today. Be sure to subscribe to Beyond Bitewings on your favorite podcast platform. For more information, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, or reach out to us on our website. You can also shoot us an email at info@eandassociates.com.